So lovely to meet you virtually. And I'm very happy to talk to you today about this topic, but also I'm really nervous. I find it to be a very hard topic to discuss. Diversity actually stirs up our emotions, and most of those emotions, as it turns out, are negative. It just actually makes your amygdala, seat of your emotions, start to ring off the hook, and there's a kind of fear and anger and anxiety that takes place. And so one could just stop there and I'd go, thank you, Adam, and now everybody go back to work, and let's not deal with it. But let's dig a little deeper and ask, why is that really? Like, what is the cause of that kind of anxiety and angst that we have? And what does science have to say about this? So, taking a really broad view of this, what do we know about human nature and groups? And there's a stunning thing that artificial groups can be created in just a few minutes, with people actually competing and thinking they're better than the other guy. I mean, you can take a group of people, like 40, 50, 20, and you can divide them in half, give one's pink stickies, on their shirts, and the other green stickies, and they will be competing and give one another, the other side, less goodies, and I mean, it's just stunning. Okay, so why? Why is that? Well, again, looking at the human being sort of side of things, when we think of human nature, we are an incredibly social species. In fact, biologists call it eusocial, for good, highly social. And eusociality creates a massive advantage on our part over solitary species. I mean, it's not just that bears don't have opposable thumbs, but they don't get into groups. They don't coordinate and plan in the hunt. We do that sort of stuff, have done it for about 1 million years. We're very good at coordinating, planning, and this has evolved into very complex behaviors which we have. And that means that we have humor, art, science, technology, all those are very complex activities which have rendered for us airplanes, cozier couches, and lighter backpacks. So, as well as software companies. So it's just an amazing thing that we've built this technological society with so many kinds of comforts and so forth. So diving in further about what this kind of discomfort is that we feel is this instinct to identify with my group. It's just something that sort of comes with the territory. It also means that it's identifying with my group and an instinct, this is the ULP instinct, to look at anybody that looks different from me with, I'm just stipulating, let's call it ULP, just for the heck of it, right? Neologizing here. That there's two kinds of thinking that human beings do, one called fast thinking and one called slow thinking. Fast thinking is the kind of thinking that I immediately like what's going on here, or, God, I just know. That kind of quick, sort of intuitive thinking, ULP is a part of that kind of thinking. Slow thinking moves beyond that kind of fast thinking and says, ooh, that was an ULP. So what's my best response in this case? So not your amygdala, but now your decider, your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, if you want to get technical, is a thing that's lasering in on this whole situation and asking, what do I do? I just got an ULP. So the ULP factor indeed is embedded in human nature, or so I would argue. The advantage of having an instinctive ULP is that a group can protect itself in case another group goes on the attack against that group, which has happened myriad times in human history because groups have competed for scarce resources and food and territory. And if you just look at the history, human history, you just see this repeated over and over and over again. So there is a reason for that protection. It is to keep a group from actually being annihilated by another group. And great civilizations have had, I mean by great, large, and great also, have had warrior castes. The Kshatriya in India in 3000 BC, Chinese have a warrior or class, and we certainly have our own people who are defending our culture. So that's what getting into an ULP condition is for. Okay, so now let me show you something really amazing. So I told you all this, and so you might go, okay, Connie, well, I think I'll just go find my group, and since I'm not the same, I don't look like other people necessarily, let's just call it off. But what happens is, this is amazing, the same ULP that gives us that kind of thing is the very same thing that when we're with people of other backgrounds, it wakes up our brains. So there's been an enormous amount of research about this. To me, that's not as intuitive. I would think that if there's a bunch of people just like Connie, just like 4 Connies got together, and we had a problem, we could come to an agreement so fast. Oh, could we agree? And we would just nail whatever it was. That is not the case, because when I look at somebody who is, I can tell and sense is different from me, it makes me automatically assume you've got different ideas than I do. You've got different perspectives. So what I want to do then is work to try to anticipate those perspectives. And that ULP, which has created a lot of group tension, is also the engine that drives creativity and high performance among groups. So that's the proposed mechanism for why diverse groups always beat out groups with the same ethnic background in terms of creativity. And so forth. Also, on a larger level, if you were looking for correlations, it turns out that large companies that have more diverse boards and more diverse employees make more money. So I got an article for you guys if you want to look it up in the little bibliography where you can chase that down. So it's not only a correlation, but we've got a bit of a mechanism, proposed causation for that. Okay, so what else do I have for you here? I need to make this move. There we go. Oh, okay, so within groups, I mean, we are, if nothing, complicated as human beings. So there's lots of slicing and dicing, if you will, within any group, and those represent even more opportunities. So people very high status, if somebody who doesn't feel like they're very high status, meet somebody who is, say, I don't know, let's say Satya walks into the room. I guess he'd have to walk into our individual rooms, but never mind. We would definitely have a moment where we go, oh my goodness, big status difference going on here. We're shot through, cultures are, with that notion of status and who's got better furniture, who's got a better hairdo. I mean, it's kind of endless and crazy, but we definitely are sort of wired for that as well, unless the group's really small. If you have a small group, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry quite as much about that. The other thing I want to point out is that we're also on a horizontal timeline group-wise. So you're put onto the planet in the young group, baby group, and then you're moving along that horizontal timeline to another group. So we're all on there somewhere. I'm on the older side, I'm just saying. And there's a wonderful psychologist, Princeton, Susan Fiske, who's done studies of the perception of younger people, that means non-old people, towards older people, and it's that they're harmless and useless. So I'm good with harmless. I'm not so great with useless, but hey. But those kinds of perceptions, those kinds of filters are things that we are applying without necessarily, anybody walk up to you with a microphone and say, what do you think about older people? It would take you a while to kind of say that and so forth. But that ends up being a kind of a perception. Okay, so it's complicated. But here's the deal. Within every human being, there is this universal, I'm calling it OAP, reflex, when we encounter somebody who is from a different sort of background or different group. And they've even put people in MRI machines, and they've shown them a picture. Say you're a black person, you're in an MRI machine, you're shown a picture of a white person. You will have that OAP reflex. You're in an MRI machine. Nobody can touch you, but you're still going to have that reflex. So that is just baked in. Think of this arrow is like 10 miles long. It's a very long way through lots of cortical activity to go from that reflex to a view, well, my group is just better than any other group. That's a really long way. Why do I want to say that? Because the universal OAP reflex is what a lot of people term unconscious bias. Now, what happens when people hear unconscious bias is a lot of people want to throw a chair. I mean, they're upset, they feel like they're being accused of being wicked. And one of the things about human nature that I just fascinate, we want to be comfortable and we want to be in control. And this sort of does something to both of those, even though technically it's the case. It's technically the case that that's what we have. But it seems as you don't want to make people feel accused of that, because it is a human condition. It's as crazy as it would be if I said, I accuse you of having a neck. It just does not really compute in that sense. You have a liver. What's wrong with you? No. It's that you've got this thing, and now what are you going to do with it? So if people go to the very extreme of my group is superior to other groups, then that really ends up being racism. But as I say, it's a 10-mile hike from one side to the other. And of course, we know from biology that every human baby is born, everybody, except for organic problems, with 100 billion neurons capable of 1 trillion synaptic connections. That's everybody on the planet. So the idea of racism is sort of really pretty crazy. But you guys all know that. You know that's crazy. All right. So let's talk about the idea of different kinds of group sizes and grouping. So I want to get historical again, just because it's fun. So if you're a Roman in 41 AD, you're a Roman, you would be on top of the world. You'd be in a big dog group, all right. But if you were a person in 41 AD living in Britannia, which ends up being what Great Britain turned into 1,000 years later, anyway, you would be that little guy because you were about to be invaded by the Roman army. So that wouldn't have been so good. But these things change. This is the fascinating thing. If you are a Roman in 410 AD, you are down on the little dog side of things because the Gauls have invaded you recently and taken all sorts of treasure and plunder from Rome, you in Rome, and the Visigoths are now going to attack you and are going to end your empire. So it's very interesting to me if you take this big view of human nature and then you take this long historical look, you can see that there have been these kind of amazing ups and downs and changes and reversal. And then when you see that little dog looking up, that's a vulnerable spot to be in for whatever group that happens to be in. So to segue, there is a philosopher, John Rawls, who's written about justice. And I'm really taken by his view, and I want to tell you a tiny story about myself if I have time. But this is just 100 squares, but I mean, we've got 6.4 billion people on the planet, but, kind of work with me. But you're someplace in that group, so you're there. If you can go out to something that Rawls calls an original position, like you try to put yourself outside of you, then go back in at another position and feel a kind of empathy and an attempt to understand another person. So I was a number of years ago in the parking lot at a Safeway, and I had my groceries, and I was headed for my car, and there was a man in a wheelchair, and he was just really struggling with it. And so I had my ULP. I thought, oh dear, what do I do here? Oh, he's different. But I said, I can't leave him here struggling. So I walked over and said, could I help you? Could I get you someplace? And he started yelling at me, and he said, yeah, you can help me. You can get me a new pair of legs. You can help me walk again. So I left, but I was so angry. I just couldn't believe how rude he was. He was just really, but I drove away just totally indignant. It took me a while to get to the original position and then go back and sort of think about, he's struggling with a wheelchair. That means he's probably newly disabled. Here's this poor guy. He's having a terrible time, and I'm so upset about how I feel. So I transcended my ULP, but I sort of got my hand slapped for it. The trick then is to go back the next time you see somebody and you know that they're going to be different, is to just go ahead. And that's a hard thing. So it's not always going to be perfect. Okay, so to end, really, groups can be like this, and I love this picture. It's like everybody comfy in the bubble, and yep, my text, everything, and so forth. Groups can really stay like this, or they can really be like this, but it really means that you jump the ULP, if you will, to get to that position. And then I would suggest, this is the invisible hand of Adam Smith, the other Adam, for teams to have incentives in the performance review, right? Because that's where really the rubber meets the road. It's not just what did I do on my own. I might be the TAM killer of the earth, but really, what did I do to help my team be more creative and higher performing? How can I get everybody to sort of take the leap and ULP and solve issues together? I am out of time, and I feel very responsible for getting you out of this meeting and on to your lives. But if you have any questions, please email me. Okay.
Great. Connie, thank you so much for spending time with us. I mean, that ULP, the ULP, right? That's a different concept, different way of thinking about it. It's something that we're going to encounter multiple times throughout a day, and hopefully next time you have that ULP, all of us, we step back and think about why we're having it, and it's not anything unnatural. I like what you said about unconscious bias. It's something like, you got it, now what are you going to do with it, right? It's not something you can escape from. It's something we all have. So This was excellent. Bruce hit me up on Instant Messenger and said this is great, and it's a wonderful change of pace, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and Maureen, you setting us up too, and coming on our team meeting and just talking to us about critical thinking and unconscious bias and the ULP and groups and all. It was wonderful.
Lovely. Well, I'm very pleased. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah.
Everyone,
I'm sorry.
Everyone have a wonderful rest of the day. And if you're interested in more of what Connie's talking about here, please reach out to Maureen. I'm sure she would welcome being a connect. And hopefully you learn something, and we can do more sessions like this in the future time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Connie.
Awesome.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.